Hello and welcome back to the Copycat Stitch podcast. I'm Bailey, I'm the Copycat Stitch, and I've got some finished objects today and a whole bunch of new cast-ons, and I just got some stuff to talk about. So I feel like I have been constantly starting new projects, but also finishing a bunch, which feels good. A lot of what you're going to see today you've never seen before, which is fun. It's January. I don't have a ton going on outside of my knitting hobby. So basically, I've just been spending a ton of time on this and chipping away at new projects. Like always. I mean, I feel like my cast on-itis maybe slowed down since the last one, but it's definitely not cured. I have been getting restless and adding new projects, but I've also been finishing a lot. So most notably, and forgive the dog hair because it's impossible not to, I finished the Cambridge jacket. I didn't realize he left it unzipped. Hold on. So if you've been with the channel for a minute, you'll recognize this from Vlogmas. This was supposed to be a Christmas gift for my husband, but I did not finish in time. So I've been working on it throughout January. It's a pattern by Anne Budd. It was in a publication, possibly Interweave. It's got this cool ribbed detail where the back kind of has a rectangle. The front does too. There's rectangles on both sides where the ribbing stops. My sewing of the zipper wasn't impeccable. It is a bit wibbly, which I don't love, but I'm certainly not willing to try to rip all these stitches out of black yarn to fix it. The only change I made to this pattern, well, I guess there's two changes technically. One, you might remember that I accidentally cast on and worked the wrong number of stitches for the first side panel I made, so that I copied it with the second side panel so that they would be symmetrical. So there's like a little too much fabric under the arms that I had to ease in, which is not ideal. So that fit issue is a result of user error and not the pattern. And then the only change that I intentionally made was that the collar was just supposed to be a 2x2 rib collar, and then the bind off edge is the edge of the garment. And I didn't like that, so I decided, zipper stuck, to knit it twice as long and fold it and sew it down, which I think looks really good. The fabric that I ended up making is a little flimsy, even with the ribbing, and I think it wouldn't have looked good. And I don't like a cast off edge as the edge. It often looks sloppy compared to a fold over. And I ended up having a lot more yarn left over at the end. The collar was the last bit I did after all the rest of it was seamed together. So I knew I had plenty of yarn and I wasn't worried about using too much. I would like to whip stitch down the inside edge of the zipper because it does kind of stick up in this unattractive way. But I think if I was to hem it down, it will stay, and that would fix the problem. So mostly done. This was an absolute nightmare to block. You might recall me talking about how there was some staining on my fingers when I was using this because the dye wasn't dye fast. It's a very dark green tonal, largely black. The dye water would not run clear. This is not superwash wool, so I felt like I really had to baby it, and I was soaking it and then draining it and running fresh water, and I would, let it soak for 20 minutes, dump that out, squeeze out as much as I could, add a whole new tub of water, immediately dump that out, squeeze out as much as I could 4 or 5 times. I probably did 25 or 30 tubs of water trying to get all the dye out, and in the end, it wasn't even 100% clear. There was still like a gray tinge to the water, but I spent at least an hour and a half actively pouring water and wringing it out in the basement, not counting the periods of time that I walked away to let it soak for a while. Partly the issue is that it's such a large garment, it's so difficult to handle wet in a way that won't stretch it out and ruin it, that it's really difficult to actually wring all of the water out properly every time. So I have a feeling a lot of that dye was just being held in the water that was in the fibers and never went anywhere. But that said, I probably will never buy yarn from this dyer again, just because it was so strenuous and so difficult for me to try to block this once it was done. But of course, once it was, I blocked it to size, sewed the zipper in, and then took some finished object photos. But the dog hair is impossible to get off of it. And I guess I should have thought of that before I made him a black sweater, but I think he's most likely to actually wear and use a black sweater. So that's what I did. Since last time, I've also finished the Cleveland Shale Shawl, which was very difficult to see last time because the pattern, the stitch pattern, creates this cool wavy lace, but it's really bunched up on the needles. So blocking makes it so much prettier. One end has this sort of forked tail, like the end of a ribbon, and then the other end has this curved edge because it's a free pattern. So I don't mind saying that it's basically you knit in garter for half of the repeat, and then there's one detail row that has eyelets in it that's not garter or stockinette. And that row has a bunch of decreases on the side, a bunch of increases in the middle, and then a bunch of decreases on the other side, which like pushes it to make this like arch pattern, which is really cool. There's no other shaping to it at all. I did post about this on my stories, and you can probably see this is very drastically different colors. So I was told these are the same colorway. When I initially found the yarn at the Dyer's booth when I was at the Central New York Fiber Festival last year, they were on the hook next to each other, but one of them had a different label with a different colorway name. So I thought there was only one skein of the color I liked, which was called Red Rose. I remember asking the business owner, do you have any more of the Red Rose? Because I would like to purchase as much of it as I can. And she said, all I have is the other skein that was next to it. And I said, oh, that one said whatever. It was a different colorway name. It was like named after a different type of flower or something. And she said, oh no, that's wrong. That one's Red Rose. But as you can see, they are so different. There is so much more pigment in this batch, and the speckling is so dense in this batch. And this is the one that I actually love and purchased, the mostly white with speckles of red and green and blue. So I don't know if they actually ultimately were the same. I don't think it's a huge deal because it's a scarf. I do love the idea of this one in particular because these are such springy colors, but this is a wool boucle yarn. So I'm not really going to make a garment out of wool boucle that I would be able to wear in like spring and summer because it'd be too warm. But also there's such springy colors that I'm going to want to wear it in spring and summer. So I thought I'll make a scarf that in the winter I can bunch up and use as a cold weather garment, but maybe in the spring is just a little shawl, wrap, whatever. And I think I was successful. It was a very easy knit. This was my on-the-go car knit for a few weeks and super easy. I did make mistakes in the pattern, repeat a few times when we were on the go because I just wasn't paying attention to where I was. In the beginning, I left a bunch of them in. I was just wrong I was not counting my rows right. And then by the time I realized that, I was like, oh, I'm not going to rip out 20 rows. It's boucle. You're not going to be able to tell. So yeah, a very simple knit. I love the pattern, and I do love the yarn once it's knit up. I wish it was all the same color, but it is what it is. I think it's funny and no harm done. It's just a little scarf for myself, so it doesn't really matter if one half is drastically more chromatic than the other half. Whoop. Okay, I have one more finished object here. I swear I finished more than that. I swear I finished something else. I feel like I cast off stuff. Oh, I did! Hold on. I completely forgot about these things because they were on the dining room table. I was like, this cannot be everything I finished. I finished several things. So first of all, I kind of improvised this baseball cap holder. Right now I've got knitting needles in the top and bottom. They're like orphan needles. I've got a whole vase full of like mismatched orphan needles that I got from collections or lots that I purchased at garage sales and stuff. It hasn't been blocked yet, so it is kind of curling in on itself, but the idea is that you would hang it on the wall like this and put the bill of a baseball cap in here to display it. And if you want, you can stack a couple on each strap. So I don't really know if it's going to require more reinforcement along the edges to keep the little basket weave stitch more visible or not curling up on itself, but I'm going to see what happens, see how it plays out. It's just for storage. My husband has so many baseball caps and they're starting to take over the surfaces upstairs. So I just wanted to get more of them on the wall and off the side table in our bedroom. This is made out of Lion Brand Low Tide, which is a synthetic chainette yarn that I do like. And this is left over from a huge cardigan that I made. I made a long cardigan sweater duster out of this color before, which I like, but it's not ideal for garments. It is a little bit rough and it's lightweight, but it just doesn't work very well for garments. It's not great on skin, and also like it doesn't insulate all that well. So I made a huge sweater duster out of it. So it's kind of a warm weather sweater, but it's very big for warm weather. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I do wear it. I do like it, but I had so much yarn that I bought years ago when Christmas tree shops had like a big buyout of Lion Brand's seasonal novelty yarns. I still have a lot of this in an orange colorway, a little of this in a pink colorway, and then a ton of different colors of Lion Brand Summer Kiss, which was a similar summertime novelty yarn that I believe is like a cotton synthetic blend. I'm always trying to think of ways to use them because I stocked up on them so much and I don't want to destash them because I do use them from time to time and I like them, but this seemed to be a good compromise. This matches pretty closely with the wall color in our bedroom, and it's a good use of the yarn. And it's a fun crochet stitch. And I don't crochet all the time, so sometimes it's a nice break for my muscles to crochet instead of knitting, because that's how you give your muscles a break, right? You switch to a different fine motor skill. I also made this sweater, and I don't even remember if I talked about, I don't think I had even cast this on last time. Obviously, it's a very bulky wool, so the only reason I was able to finish an entire sweater in a matter of weeks is because it's large needles, large weight wool. The wool is from Rhinebeck. I bought 3 sweater quantities at Rhinebeck, 2 of them in the bulky weight of Lamb's Pride and 1 in the worsted weight, and this is the bulky weight. I really love the color. I don't super love how the fit of this came out, and we'll talk about it. If you're familiar with my project history, you might be aware that I play it a little fast and loose as far as gauge goes. I'm not very meticulous about the fit of my garments. Sometimes I care more about if they're going to fit the measurements exactly, and sometimes I care a lot less. If I do care more, I make the effort and do a swatch and actually check my gauge and make the appropriate accommodations. In this case, again, I was dealing with a very severe case of cast-on-itis, and I just wanted to start a sweater, and I thought if I start a bulky one, it's not going to be on my needles forever at the same time as all of these other projects I already have going. So I chose sweater number 14, V-neck version from My Favorite Things Knitwear. But that said, that is not what this is. This garment does not reflect the dimensions or the design choices that the designer laid out for that pattern, because my gauge was very, very far off. And I realized that early on, but I was committed enough to the project that I was like, I don't think it's worth frogging the whole thing. I'm just going to make adjustments as I go. And I think ultimately I made so many adjustments that this isn't the sweater that I started out making. It's not the worst. I haven't tried to wear it yet. I actually just pulled it off the blocking mats. It's basically been dry since yesterday, but I hadn't removed it from the blocking mats. So I just did that now for the podcast. I knew I wasn't going to have enough yarn. Well, let me back up. First of all, this is a sweater that you cast on. You can kind of see here where the shoulder seams are. They're not seams, but where the shoulders are, where you pick up the stitches. So you cast along the shoulders first, and then work back and forth for the front halves that meet under the V-neck and for the back half. And that number of stitches is possibly the only thing that is actually true to pattern. Is I cast on the number of stitches that it called for. And then after I started knitting the back, I realized pretty quickly that one, this was going to be way bigger than I thought it was based on the gauge and the pattern because I wasn't making gauge. And two, I was probably going to run out of yarn. Certainly if I continued making it at the pattern, but if I made it to pattern, it would be like big enough for like Andre the Giant. Like it would have been very oversized in all directions, not wearable. So what I did instead was just constantly try it on and stop and check my work as I went. I did far fewer repeats of all the increases for the V-neck, of the increases for the sleeves. Are you serious, Adrian? Buddy, he is climbing into one of my project bags to sleep on one of my whips right now. It's very cute, but I'm not gonna move my camera setup to show you. He was like pawing at the yarn to get a good pillow. I think he's cute. What basically ended up happening is even though the length of the body and the sleeves and everything is more or less what the designer intended, the proportion of all those things to the shoulders is off. So the shoulders are really much larger than they should be for the size I wanted to make, and therefore the whole body is a lot wider than it should be. So when I blocked it, I made an effort to try to narrow it a little, I guess, and really aggressively block it for length. It has softened up. It is a much different fit than before. I did take some footage of me trying it on pre-blocking because it was very stiff. And that's the other thing about the blocking is that I don't think that the size needles that I used for this were ideal. This says it's a bulky weight yarn, but I already had to go up a needle size just because using the size in the pattern made such a stiff fabric, it wouldn't have been usable. So I went up a size despite the fact that my gauge was too large already. Lots of red flags on this one, but it's my knitting. Like, I know that that probably stresses a lot of people out, but that's how I do it. That's what I felt like doing that day. That's what made me feel good as I was working on it. And I have a finished object that I like well enough. If I decide I don't like it, I'll frog it. It's my hobby. I'll deal with it, you know? So possibly good. Like I said, I haven't tried it on yet to see, but it looks a lot better holding it up now and a lot. I mean, I wanted it to be oversized. It's not like I was trying to make a fitted sweater and I ended up with this. This is pretty similar to what I wanted. I just don't know how the fit in the shoulders is going to work out. The drop shoulders are very far down my arm. They're like really way too far down. But we'll see. I think I like it. I have plans to use the other sweater quantities of this yarn soon, but like not right away because it's kind of not the most fun yarn to work with. I have worked with it before, but I did it in combination with mohair, and I think that that really improved the experience as far as the texture on my hands. Working just with the lamb's pride this time was not my favorite. It kind of dried my skin out. I didn't love it. All right, I have one more little finished object because I don't think I've mentioned on the channel at all yet. But I am expecting my first nephew to be born in the springtime. So since the baby shower is coming up in March, I have started making a bunch of baby stuff. I made this little, it's a flax raglan. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the flax pullover. It's very common. It's a free pattern and it goes from this little tiny size, this is the smallest size, all the way up to like extra large or adult sizes. I don't mean literally extra large, like plus size adult sizes. It's a big range of sizes. And I have decided to try to use as much stash yarn for the baby as I can. I'm being selective. I'm trying to choose colors that I think would be cute for him, but also washable. I'm only using yarns that you can put in the washing machine. My sister is definitely capable of laying flat to dry, and she is very knit worthy herself. I think she knows how to take care of hand knits. But you don't want to give a baby anything you can't put in the washing machine. That's just irresponsible. So I mean, this little tiny flex pullover. Baby sweaters are just so fun to make because it's incredible to see a whole sweater just like appear in like 30 hours. I love it. I don't remember what the yarn is. I think it was like a clearance single skein that I had from a long time ago. And it's an acrylic, but it's really soft and it's worsted, so it's a bit thicker for him. But I think it came out really, really cute, and I'm already enjoying making more baby things. So that is going to be my segue into my whips segment because I have two more baby gifts in this bag. One of them is another sweater I've been working on. I cast this on the other day. I'm at the bottom ribbing right now, so I know it looks long. This one's definitely a bit larger than the other one, so maybe for when he's a little older. But again, I'm trying to use up my scraps. I had this single skein of Stylecraft Special DK in the color cream, and then I have a whole bunch of like this whole array in a basket of 10-gram mini skeins of DK weight yarn from Vicki Brown Designs, because I was in like a subscription club for a long time when she sends you 5 10-gram mini skeins a month. And it was really fun, but then after a while I was like, what am I going to do with all of these tiny DK weight minis? So I picked out 4 of them that I thought kind of went together for the stripes on this sweater. And I believe this sweater is called Good Old Raglan. It's been fun. I'm enjoying it. I might even save the pattern to make an adult size for myself later because it's a really nice, simple, free pattern. And I like that it has the options for stripes built in, but of course you can make it solid or do it however you need as well. I am going to do full long sleeves on it, and they're going to be striped with the same sequence of stripes as the body. But turned out to be a great way to use up these little itty bitty minis that I have. And I think that these colors look good together, and fun little sweater for him. I hope the colors don't bleed when I block it. I don't, even if they do, I don't know what sort of risk it is to acrylic, because the Stylecraft is acrylic and these are sock blend yarn. I think they're 75-25. I don't know. I mean, I haven't invested too much time in this. Maybe it would look cool and edgy for a little baby to have like bleeding dye in his clothes. That's probably not the case, but I don't care. I've also started working on a blanket. So as we've talked about before, my sister loves neutrals. She doesn't like bright colors. I'm not entirely sure what she has in mind for the nursery, and I wanted to use something in stash. And I had this one big fat skein of Karen, is it 1 pound? Yeah, Karen 1 pound in the colorway Lace. This was left over from an Afghan project I did in 2020. And I don't think it's entirely a full skein, but it's like 90% of a skein. So I started I believe this one's called Rattan Blanket. They have all sizes. It's also a free pattern. I'm making the smallest size, the baby blanket size. And it's got this pretty basket weave texture around the edges. You can kind of just tell I started the stockinette section here. So there's basically going to just be this little square of stockinette in the middle. On a larger blanket, the border is actually the same. So the instructions in the pattern are to knit in the stitch pattern for 8 inches, and then there's an 8-inch border on either side that you keep working as you add length to the blanket. And on the other end, there's another thick 8-inch border. So you've got the basket weave and an 8-inch frame around the stockinette center. But the frame size doesn't change with the different sizes of the blanket. The way the pattern is written, they all have an 8-inch frame no matter how big the stockinette section is in the middle. So for the baby blanket, it's kind of laughably small in my opinion. I think it looks a little silly, but it'll come out okay. I think I like it. I did, because I want to use this yarn up, and because I'm not purchasing anymore to finish a project like this, and I certainly don't want to have to get near the end and either make it an uneven frame or rip out 8 inches of a stitch pattern. Once I got to the end of the stitch pattern, but before I did the first stockinette row, I put it on try-on tubing and I weighed just the 8 inches. So I know that when I get to the other end, as I'm working through my yarn, I have to stop when I have about 80 grams, a little more than 80 grams just to be safe, left. So that will give me enough to do the other end and get as close as I can to using up all the yarn, but not playing yarn chicken and running out of yarn. So yeah, I'm enjoying this one so far, especially now that I'm at the stockinette section. It's a little bit better. I love stitch textures so much. They look so beautiful, but it's not my favorite to work on because I do tend to knit while I do other things, like while I'm riding in the car, watching TV, reading a book, or sometimes at work while I'm like watching a Zoom meeting or something. So a texture like this is something I'm so much more likely to make mistakes at because I don't usually have the time to actually pay attention to one that changes every other row, because the right side and the wrong side are different. It's a 6-row repeat where they're all a little different. There's 2 rows that are knit 1, purl 1, and then the other 4 rows are all different from each other. So I'm enjoying it. I like it. I would recommend this for sure. This would make a really classy, like larger blanket, like a throw blanket if you have worsted weight yarn, which maybe I'll do someday for somebody else. But that's for the baby right now. So the baby shower's at the end of March. I have plans to do a handful of other things before then too. I went through my stash and took a basket and picked out a bunch of washable yarns that are colors I think that would look good or that my sister would approve of if it's for decor. And I have that basket set aside. So as I feel like itching to cast on something new, I've been trying to cast on another baby project because, first of all, it won't be on the needles as long and it won't add to my sum total of whips for as long. And also, there are things that I need to get done in the next like 6 weeks or so anyway. Okay, so I do want to briefly touch on my own Uno sweater because I did introduce this in the last one, but this has been at a standstill for a couple weeks because I misjudged the amount of yarn and I changed my mind. So we talked about last time that I knit the whole body and then I stopped, knit the collar and knit the sleeves so that I could just work in the body until I ran out of yarn. However, this has very pretty long sections of ribbing at the top and bottom, including the bottom ribbing for the body. So I was finding it hard to judge where I had to stop in order to get 4 inches of ribbing for the entire trunk of the body, and also get as close as I can to the end of the skein. And I kind of stopped and started doing the ribbing at a point, and I think it's too cropped. I don't like it. It's too different from what the designer intended. And this is made from holding 2 different hand dyes from 2 different dyers together. I got a bunch of this really pretty hand dyed mohair, and I got it at Indie Untangled, and it was the show colorway called Witched with Frost. That's from Aster Fiber Company. And then I also held it double with Dream in Color yarn, their smushy sock base in the colorway Ghost Town. So I had 3 hanks. Well, actually, I had 1 hank of the mohair from going to Indie Untangled. And then when I got home, I was like, I really should have bought more. It was the first stop of the day, and it was honestly my first purchase of the day, and I was a little overwhelmed, and I didn't want to buy a sweater quantity for literally my first purchase. But as it turns out, I should have because it was one of my favorite colors that I saw the whole day. So I ordered 2 skeins of it later when she made it available online. And then I bought the Ghost Town smooshy base to go with it later at my local yarn store. And they only had 3 skeins, but I bought all 3 thinking, well, now I have 3 of each. But of course, mohair has a lot more yardage in a skein than a fingering weight does. And once I got to this point and realized it was going to be way more cropped than the pattern says and way more cropped than I really want it to be, and additionally, I would run out long before I get to the 4 inches of ribbing, so it wouldn't even be proportional, in my opinion. I called the yarn store back. They don't have any more of that colorway in that base. I did find it available online. Jimmy Bean's Wool had it available for pre-order, so I pre-ordered 1 skein, and all it says on the website is will ship in February. It doesn't have any more specific information than that. So I've paid for it. It'll ship out sometime this month, and then when it comes, I'll cake it up. I'm going to frog back what ribbing I've done on the body here so that I can add more length to the stockinette section. And then the knitting is going to be dictated by how much mohair I have left, but I do have more than half a skein left. So I think I'll be able to knit to pattern once I have that wool to supplement. So I learned my lesson playing fast and loose with the gauge in this case, but honestly, it didn't really hurt me. It's not like I could have bought 4 in the first place. I bought everything my local yarn store had the day I saw it, and I just hoped it would be enough. And when it wasn't, I found a solution. So I am dying to have this sweater. I love how it's coming out. I love the color so much. Honestly, it's been zipped up in this bag for weeks while I'm waiting on the new yarn to come in. And when I took it out to talk about it right now, I kind of fell in love all over again because it looks so good. And I can't wait to have it. All right, buddy, I got to talk about this one now. Excuse me. All right. So this one has been kind of hibernating for a while. You haven't seen it in a while. This is my Hermione's Room of Requirement sweater. It's a crochet pattern from the official Harry Potter crochet pattern book that Lisa Artori wrote. I bought these white tweed, these 3 white tweed colorways at the end of 2022 from Witchfire Fibers. They look so good together. I love it. I finished the color work a long time ago, and it was sitting in hibernation after I had split for sleeves and the yoke was done, and I had basically done like 1 round after the color work yoke was done, and now the entire chunk of it is just going to be in the main color. And I set it aside and didn't work on it all last summer. I pulled it out in the winter, and I had been hesitating to work on it. I wasn't super keen on it. And then when I did, I was like, I think the reason that I've been avoiding this project is because it's so obvious it's not going to fit me. I tried on the yoke with the sleeves, which, like I said, it was just like a tiny little strap of like 1 or 2 rows of crochet, like for the underarm sleeves, and it outright hurt. It was way too small. And when I measured my yoke depth, I'm actually 2 inches short of where the pattern says the yoke should be before I split for sleeves. So it is very stretchy. It's the stitch is extended single crochet. So I think blocking will open it up a little bit, but there's no way it was going to salvage that situation. The sleeves were way too tight. It was cutting into my underarm, super uncomfortable. So I decided to frog back, and then I'm just going to work the yoke for about 2 inches in the main color before I split for sleeves and follow the directions accordingly from there. Because I think adding that length, the problem was that they were starting way too far up here, whereas if the sleeves start here, it's not going to be so small. And then blocking for sure will add a bunch of room to it. So I haven't done much. This is fingering weight and extended single crochet. So it's like a very slow stitch. It's not much taller than a single crochet, but it takes as long as a double crochet basically. And it's on this 2.5 millimeter hook. Very tiny stitches. It takes a long time, and I am also not capable of crocheting without looking, but I am capable of knitting without looking. So I haven't been working on this a ton, but I have been picking it up pretty regularly to chip away at it in little chunks. But I absolutely don't think this one's going to be finished for this cold weather season, just because such a large surface area with such small stitches, and I'm not very motivated to work on it all the time. So it's gonna just keep chipping away. It's gonna be a whip for a very long time, and someday I'll be very happy to have it. I do think it looks great. I'm just not loving the process of fingering weight crochet. I do have one new sweater cast on that you haven't seen, and it's really in no fit state to show you. It's gonna look ridiculous because it's a thneed. This is, first of all, so pretty. I love this pattern so much. So I've been sitting on this yarn for a while. When I had stocked up in the past, bought a bunch of black Hobie Diablo mohair, and I already had, I think, 3 or 4 skeins of Hobie Unicorn, which is just like a fingering weight sock blend that comes in solid colors. And I had purposefully bought black for both because I know I would get a ton of use out of a black cardigan, especially if it's made with mohair. It'll be very comfy. I'll toss it on over everything. Everybody knows black yarn is not the most fun to work with just because of visibility issues. I just really felt like getting started on it. And my cast-on-itis isn't so painful to me if I actually cast on things that I know I've been working on, or if I feel like these are skeins that have been sitting in my stash forever. It feels like making progress in a way, working through something that I've been telling myself I'm going to do. Let's try it on a little bit. I'm going to try to do it without hitting my microphone. Whoop. Okay. So it's a saddle shoulder construction. Forgive me, I can't remember the name of the pattern, which makes me sad because it's so pretty. It's very simple, but there's really refined details in the construction that make it look so nice. These saddle shoulders are made of ribbing, and then around the armhole is a similar band of ribbing. So So the shoulder is definitely supposed to sit farther back than this because this armhole would be very deep. This is the front. It's a V-neck cardigan. You can kind of see it, right? You can kind of see it coming together. And then there's the saddle shoulder on the other side. So it's taken a long time. These are quite small needles, but I'm really, really enjoying working on it. And it's largely something I can do without really paying attention. There's the little ribbing details on the edges of the panel that are worked as you go. But other than that, it's stuck in it. And I do love working with a wool mohair combo. I think that's my favorite way to knit. It's a little cliched and overdone right now, but I honestly enjoy the process of working on those the most. I love the way they come out the most, and I like wearing them the most. So I'm not upset about it. So this is my last whip. I cast on this Berlin scarf when Knits announced her knit along in a recent podcast episode. She had shown this pattern before in a video. I think it was one of the videos where she kind of picks out a bunch of patterns and discusses them. And I thought it was really pretty and I wanted to make it. And then when she announced that she was doing make along to make a fuzzy scarf, I thought, well, I really want to make that one. That's what she's making for her own make along. And I had thought about making that pattern before anyway. And I have this yarn, which I think will work really well. And according to the pattern, I have a little more than enough. I'm just going to jump in and do it because I don't have any like neutral scarves, which sounds crazy because all I do is knit. But like I've talked about in the past, I'm very drawn to colorful skeins, even though I find them less wearable. And I've made so many very, very colorful shawls and scarves, and I really don't have any just plain neutral ones that go with everything. So I have this beautiful wool. This is from Wool Addicts, Ling Yarns, Wool Addicts, and the base is called Faith, and it is a chainette with blown fiber. I had 5 balls of it. I had bought it on clearance at my local yarn store a long time ago. It's been in stash for a while. It's this very muted kind of gray and taupe. The fiber content says 77% virgin wool, 23% nylon. So I would imagine that the tube is made of nylon and the blown fiber is all that wool inside, and that's what gives it the color. It's very soft. It's really, really squishy, and I'm very much enjoying this. I can't wait to actually have the finished scarf. The scarf is worked in a tube, so I keep having this thought that like this is something I possibly could have done on the knitting machine, but that feels like not the point of a knit along. And also it's really nice to work with this yarn. Like I'm actually enjoying the tactility of it. But this has become my on-the-go project, my in the car, in the office, whenever I have a little downtime project and I need something absolutely mindless, because it is just knitting in stockinette in the round forever. You basically cast on the amount of stitches recommended, and then you knit until you have a very, very long tube. And then the most distinctive, interesting part of the pattern is like the knit fringe on the ends, which I will imagine I'll learn how to do when I actually get to that part in the project. I am thinking similarly to my technique with the baby blanket. What I'm going to do is when I get to the end of this ball of yarn and I'm starting the next one, I'm going to weigh the new ball of yarn so that I know how much it was exactly before I started. I'm going to follow the instructions to add the fringe onto this, the cast on end, which has a provisional cast on, and then weigh that ball of yarn after I finish the fringe on this end to see exactly how much yarn I needed for the fringe. And that way, that will be my target for when I'm knitting in the round. I know exactly how much I can use and how much I need to reserve to do the fringe on the other end to have minimal leftovers for a project like this, because my stash is getting a little out of hand. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about that in my Knit Year's resolutions video, which has not disappeared. I've just had a lot going on and haven't been able to work on it. Oh my God, the sun. It's actually been frustratingly spring-like weather for us for 2 days. First of all, we didn't have the sun here for over a month. The local weather was talking about it, and they said the sun came out for 1 hour in the month of January. That's it. It's been just overcast and miserable or snowy or both. And now we're getting a little bit of sun. It's sabotaging my podcast. I apologize. But also, it's just torturously spring-like because I know we're going back to snow on Monday. Go get your toy, sweetheart. Olive. Every time. So I don't have any acquisitions either. I have not been yarn shopping. I've just been using everything I can from stash and working it down a little bit. So I hope this was a rather quick podcast for me, and I hope you enjoyed it. I am coming up with some new structure for my channel. I'm working on a schedule for creating and releasing content, and I'm hoping I'll have a little more of a productive year insofar as my YouTube projects. Girly, it's like they know, they can tell my voice changes when I'm done with the podcast and I'm signing off and I'm almost done, and that gets her all hyper. She always does this at the end of the podcast. Why? Does she get it? She's my most devout viewer. Yeah? Okay. So anyway, thanks for joining me today. I hope you stick around and subscribe if you haven't already, because I am really trying to buckle down and come up with a more consistent release schedule for my channel, come up with some more formats for my content, and to devote more of my time to keeping consistent content, because I think that this is a hobby that I really want to lean into. So that said, I hope you come back for my next video, which should be, if I keep to my new schedule, my Knit Year's resolutions, even though it's February. I've already been keeping my Knit Year's resolutions for all of January. I just didn't have a chance to tell you about them yet. So that's all for today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.